Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Welcome back to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Katie Beth Hand. My guest today is an expert in men's somatic mindfulness, an emotional resilience coach, a leadership transformation coach for high-performing men, and the co-founder of MELD. Owen Marcus, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited to have you with me today.
I'm excited too, Katie. Thank you.
Absolutely. So before we dive right in with all the work you currently do, I was hoping you could take a few minutes and talk to our listeners a little bit about your backstory. You have kind of an interesting and very specific niche in the coaching and leadership world. So tell us a little bit about your background and really what sparked your passion for the work that you do now.
What sparked it was a necessity for me. It particularly started about 30 years ago. I was in a relationship, and one night, this beautiful, patient woman kept on saying, "Owen, I can't feel you. I can't feel you." I kept on sort of not arguing with her, but debating with her, giving her reasons, why she should feel me. And then after several minutes, I got smart enough to realize they were all reasons, they weren't emotional connection. So that was the opening, but I certainly didn't know how to create that emotional connection, but I knew I wasn't. And that got me into doing men's groups out of my clinic. And at the time I was in Scottsdale, Arizona. And then I moved to North Idaho, did a few groups. And then 20 years ago, I really changed the model of men's work and men's group because I saw that the traditional model was not working. And I applied all that I'd learned clinically and, in postgraduate training with somatic psychotherapy, somatic body work, which is really how to use the body and the body physiology to connect to emotions and really connect to other people. And I saw in my private practice that it really worked well with men, because with most men, if you ask them, and I was one of them, what do you feel emotionally? We'd be looking for the closest door out of the room. Where if you ask them, tell me about your stress or tell me about your body, they'd gladly do that. And then out of that, we'd start to have an emotional connection or conversation. And so I applied that model of technology to working with men, and I did not think it would take off like it has.
That's very interesting. Why do you think, this is the age-old question, I'm sure, why do you think it's so much harder to get men to talk about their emotions and really try to process those?
It is an old question, but a very good question. I think there's several answers. I think a big one's the culture. And I think we all know that, how we're trained. And the boys just sort of pick it up, and we train and reinforce our peers to not be emotional, because the research has shown up to the age of 2, actually, boys are more emotional than girls. But the culture intervenes, and we direct boys and men to shut all that down. Different cultures are different. And then we get into the trauma and stress. And I think in many ways, men have more trauma and stress, and we can get into why, but just basically because we're told that our value is around performance, and particularly when we look at how men have served in the military and the trauma they've survived because of that.
Do you work with a lot of veterans? Is that a large portion of the population you get to work with?
It's not a large part, but we've worked with special op teams, and we always seem to have vets in our programs. And we've had some of these vets, along with other men, coming back and say, this work or this men's group that we created or whatever literally saved my life. Because before, now in hindsight, they could say it was a trauma that was having me seriously consider suicide. And the work you did with us and working with the physiology of trauma and releasing that, has saved my life. And that's an extreme example. Now, obviously, most of the men that come to us are not on the verge of suicide.
Yes. Tell us a little bit. All of this is so fascinating to me. And one of the things I love about the coaching that you do is that you really look at the science-backed things and then combine it in what I feel like people tend to look at traditional therapies and things like that, a little bit more like it's a little bit more on the emotional spectrum. So I love that all of the things that you do are science backed. Tell us a little bit more about MELD coaching. What does that process look like? If someone is interested in this, someone who's listening, what does it look like to get started working with you or working with this program?
It can be one-to-one coaching. We have a more developed sort of elite group coaching, which is a 12-week program I created. And then we have like a 10-week introductory program where we teach some of these basic skills and certainly principles. But one of the key things, along with the somatic part, is the what I call the communal part, because men really get a lot more than we would have thought out of being with other men in emotionally safe places. So you take the women out of the context, you create some simple rules of engagement like confidentiality, and then we sort of seed it maybe by us being vulnerable or some guys being vulnerable. And quickly, all the men realize that you're not going to be shamed for just being authentic. You're actually going to be honored for that. That shifts everything. And then we have this sort of field to play in and learn these skills we never got to learn. So that somatic part and the communal part is pretty much a part of everything we do. And then we go into retreats that we do. And then we have like a 9-month certification program that we do for laymen and coaches and therapists and psychiatrists.
That is really cool. It's so unique. I do think it's so interesting. And I love that this is targeted specifically for men. To some degree, I feel like women are just more probably culturally, that's how we've been trained. But it's a lot easier for us to be vulnerable, especially in groups with women that we trust, even strangers. It's easier to
Mhm.
make that emotional connection. There's an easier path to that vulnerability that you can connect with. And with men, I just feel like men are so much more guarded. So I love that you kind of cracked the code on creating a safe space where men can really get together and have some authentic conversation, talk about emotions, and is everything that you guys talk about, is it usually trauma related or trauma based?
No, no, it's not. It's minority. You like stories. Here's a story. A few years ago, we were doing a training in Joshua Tree, and we'll have up to 60 guys in the room. This one was not that many. But one of the things we do in the beginning, everyone sits in a big circle. We do what we call a check-in. You say your name and a few other things about, maybe why you're there, 30 seconds. And we go around. But before we do that, I say we're changing the rules of engagement. Here, you're going to get honored for, your bravery about being vulnerable. And eventually, a guy just takes a risk and he sees that he's not being shamed like he would be out there. He's actually being honored. And then guys are competitive. So they all start competing. Oh, I could be more vulnerable. I could be more vulnerable. And then we get to the end, like he's like the second, third to last guy at the end. And this big burly guy, all tatted up, ex-Marine, martial art teacher. And he says, I don't like men and don't touch me. Everyone's hugging each other. And we go, oh, okay, okay. And then several days later at the end, we're doing the comparable sort of checkout round. Everyone's just saying a few things. And he's sitting there near the end of that circle and going, I love you guys. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you. But so often the tougher we are as guys, the bigger we are a teddy bear in the inside. And he just needed to feel safe for him to say that. And it took a while for him to do that. And so that's pretty much what we see, that we all want that, but we just don't know how to do it, and we don't so often have a place to do it in.
That's true. And do you ever work with couples who are kind of, you started with your story about how you realized you weren't emotionally available, even though you felt like you had been. Do you ever work with couples, or do you typically just work with the male or the spouse? Do you just work with one?
My partner's a couples therapist, and we do
Okay.
couple trainings when we do them down in Costa Rica, and it's amazing. These people come for like 6 days, and they come in a little standoffish, but we have this particular program that we've developed, and we've taken it from other people that have been doing this for years, and we honed it. And I bring in this somatic stuff, particularly for the men, but for the couples, and it makes a huge difference. And one of the things that I end up doing so often is, like me, the guy will be talking to his partner, and his partner's getting pissed or checking out, and he picks it up, probably consciously and certainly unconsciously, and there's research on how that happens. And so his stress gets up. So he tries even harder. You know what happens with that. And then I go, hey, Joe, can I help you? He goes, yeah, yeah, help me. I go, all right, I'm just going to channel what I know you feel, but what you're not saying. And so I start speaking to you, Katie, and within a minute or so, often tears come to your eyes because you sort of knew it and you wanted to feel it, but you weren't feeling it. And when I say, even though I'm saying it, you're feeling it. And he sees that and his jaw drops because, yeah, that is what I felt, but I didn't know how to say it. And then I go, okay, I'm going to work with you right now on you saying it. And part of what we do, what I end up doing with these guys in consort with their partners, is teaching them how to speak this language. It's been a foreign language for us that really connects them first to themselves and then to their partner. And once they get a little traction, this is what we see in our retreats, they pick it up really quickly. And then the relationship goes from being a stressful relationship, or one maybe it's not stressful, but not as fulfilling, to one that's really just supporting each other.
Do you find, I think all this is really fascinating. Do you find that you have like more people coming in from certain parts of the population? Obviously, you work with mostly men, but beyond that, is it usually, high level driven business leaders? Is it small business owners? Is it your average, run of the mill, maybe blue collar job? What type of men tend to come in and really need this type of, I mean, all of us probably do,
Right.
right? But what type of clients do you usually work with? Or is there a specific type of client you search out that you like to work with?
Well, and we don't tend to get younger men. Sometimes we have guys in the 20s. They're usually from 30 to 70. Most are probably 45 to maybe 55, usually professionals, a lot of entrepreneurs. So generally they're men that have been successful, professionally, and so they reach a certain level and then they realize, all right, I could, be more professional or more successful. Great, but I'm losing in this connection level because I come home and no one's there, or, we're not connecting. And sometimes their partners are saying, look, you got to do something or I'm gone. We had a guy at our last retreat that his wife basically said, either you do this retreat or I'm going right now. All right, I'll do a retreat. Within 24 hours, he started, connecting to himself. He started texting to his wife, and he was showing me, like 2 days later, these texts that his wife was sending back to him. I love you, and then things that she hadn't said in years, just because he was able to connect to himself, and in doing that, he was able to connect to her. And once she felt that, she downregulated. And he was this, successful business owner. So, he knew how to run a business successfully, but he didn't know how to run a relationship successfully.
Right. Definitely I can see that just your intelligence level does not directly equate to your emotional intelligence level. It's interesting you said that a lot of your clients come in kind of in that 40s to late 50s range. That makes sense to me because that is that range typically where a lot of people there's a lot of transition. There's some transition work wise. Maybe we're moving up in the world. There's a lot of transition with maybe empty nesters. And I know that phase of life can be difficult because when you are married and you've got kids at home and there's 20 years in there where you're really very focused. It's easy to focus on other things aside from just your relationship, aside from just your own emotional well-being. So I think that makes a lot of sense that it's those 40s and 50s coming in. Kids are leaving the house, the
Mhm.
business is picking up, all of these things, and all of a sudden they're realizing there's not an emotional connection maybe with the spouse at home they've been living with for the last 30 years. So very, very interesting and just interesting work. I love that you're able to spark this conversation with, I think this typical group of men tends to really, and men in general tend to really be looked over with things like this. So really cool that you're out there getting them connected, getting them plugged in. And on the behalf of women of the world, we appreciate your work and your
Our
efforts.
women are our best referrals. I mean, them therapists, we get a tremendous amount of women and therapists sending us guys because they all love these guys, and these top therapists will tell these guys, you don't need therapy. You just need a place to sort of learn and practice. And what I tell the guys, and tell, these couples is the problem's not with you, it's with your model. The model that we were giving was very limited. And so, we'll give you a more naturalistic model that we all should have been given, but we weren't. And once you have the model, because it is naturalistic, it's easy to learn and it's sustainable. You're not fighting it. You're not trying to remember anything. It just comes quite naturally.
Yes, I imagine there's a lot of freedom for men who go through this and are able to really connect to their emotions and work through some of these things, realizing that these may be things that and emotions and feelings they've been repressing since they were kids. That we train kids so early culturally, oh, boys don't cry, don't be a sissy, oh, we don't have big emotions. And so from a very early age, I feel like we are, and this is coming from a mom of 3 boys and a girl. I can definitely say that your earlier statement that boys are actually more emotional, around and under the age of 2 than girls is most certainly the case. And so it's interesting kind of I know your target is really obviously men, but from a mom raising boys, it's very interesting to read your research and look at your program from that perspective of making sure I'm giving my boys, raising them with a healthier sense of emotional intelligence, letting them know that some of these tools and things are out there, letting them know that feeling feelings isn't bad. You don't have to repress every bad emotion that you feel. It's very interesting coming at this from the mom side of things and the wife side of things as well. I'm married to a big tough firefighter he's that guy you talked about at the beginning that would, if you said, let's talk about emotions, he'd be out the door before you finish the sentence. So very, very, very interesting. Tell
Yeah,
our
well,
listeners.
and one of the things in sort of our or men's defense is that, and I talk about it in an old TEDx talk I did, is that, I think ever since we left the Industrial Revolution, women had to step up because men were at work. And so what happened, it's not a conspiracy, just naturally, the model for emotionality for men has been a more feminine model. And so what we found is we put men together and we co-create the natural model of what it is to be emotional as a man, which shares some of the things that a woman would experience for sure, but there's some unique ways of being emotional as a man, and we need other men to sort of learn that with and practice with. And once guys, and this is the power of these free groups that we do, once they start doing that on a regular basis, we see huge transformations in guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see how that would have such a huge impact. And I imagine it impacts every aspect of a man's life, right? Obviously, we've talked about how it would affect them as a spouse, but also as a father, or also as, you're working with a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. Some of the best bosses I've ever worked for or worked with were highly emotionally intelligent men who were able to that somehow it just made working for them better. Nobody likes to work for the private tough guy who never has any emotions over anything, and that's just true. So it's interesting that we've created a world where men aren't supposed to have emotions, but we actually like it when you guys do.
We do, and women want men to stand up. And one of the things I talk about is this quality of assertive vulnerability. And so, and that's particularly true for men. Not that women can't have it, but this ability to be vulnerable and assertive. So that, men think if they're vulnerable, they collapse and they're weak because that's how they interpret it in terms of how they were taught. And we show them, no, no, you can be vulnerable and strong at the same time. And when they see that in other men, they go, oh, okay. And then they start doing that. And then again, they get honored for it. And then it starts to generalize throughout their whole life.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And how it just it's a sort of a ripple effect, how it positively impacts every aspect of their life, which is really, really cool. Tell our listeners before we run out of time. So on your website, and we're going to list both of them for our listeners, we'll list them in the show notes. So if you don't have a pen to write this down, that's okay. But on owenmarcus.com, and then of course at meld.community, you have a lot of really cool resources, ways to get started with MELD, which is really neat. And then you also have some free things that people can get on and download and work through. So tell our listeners a little bit about a formula to life success. That's something everybody wants. So what can they expect with that?
Well, one of the things I came up with several years ago, just from everything I come up with, I'm not that smart, but I observed. And one of the things that I saw was when we were working well ourselves or with others, is there was a simple formula, and I call it the ROC formula, ROC. So we slow down to relax, and everyone's told guys and boys, they told me, relax, but they didn't teach us how to relax. So this is a lot of the somatic part. We teach the physical body how to relax. And it's really pretty simple. And once you slow the physiology down, you naturally relax. The O is to open up, to be vulnerable. And that almost happens naturally when we're relaxed. Because when we're aware of our body, we're not in a threat response, focused on the outside, our nervous system's downregulated. So we start to be open, we start to be vulnerable, and that's a setup to reach out, which is a C for connect. And we start to connect to others from the state of being relaxed or present and open and vulnerable. And that's really the core of developing, lasting or deep relationships. And again, your physiology starts to learn that, and it starts to become self-replicating.
That's really cool. So, okay, to kind of branch off from there, you've been doing this type of work for a while now. Lots of different research, lots of different things. I love that you said that you are somebody who you're just a good observer, which is such an incredible, it's an underrated skill. So, with everything that you've really observed and learned over these past few decades from doing this, what would you say one of the biggest mistakes is that men make when it comes to self-care, emotional intelligence, emotional regulation? What is one of the biggest mistakes that you see out there?
That they need help. I had an integrated medical clinic. I had a lot of friends who are physicians and dentists, and we all used to sadly laugh that working with men was always frustrating because they'll send their family in, but they often won't come in until they got to literally crawl in. And I had guys crawling in to see me. And then after a few sessions, like, oh, this is great. But their friend, which could have been their doc or whatever, for 10 years was telling them to see me. But, they had to get really bad before they got help. And it's sort of the macho thing. It's, all the things that we could think of. And so what I encourage guys to do, with us, try the free stuff. We're going to be doing some more free stuff in the next few months where, you can have that experience and you're worth the investment. Your family's worth the investment. And in most cases, I think guys would say that the return is way greater than they expected. So there's a really good ROI, but it does take work. And I tell these guys, it's like, we know how it is when we're out of shape. It takes a little work to get in shape. And once you're in shape, staying in shape is actually fun. And so this is sort of like getting in emotional shape. It's going to be a little work. I'm going to tell guys that, but it can be more fun and maybe quicker than you think. But once you're there, you'll stay in shape. You'll become an emotional athlete.
That's really cool. I love the term emotional athlete. That puts it in an easy frame of reference to kind of understand. Okay, last question before we run out of time. And this might be the most difficult one I've asked you so far. So, all right, Owen, through all of the work that you're doing, working with all of these guys, putting all of these pieces of the puzzle together, through all of that work that you do, what is it that you hope your legacy will be?
That the biggest one is that I've really changed the relationship between genders or men and women because I think you could say that all wars start with a war between the sexes. And so my niche is working with these men and really changing what it is to be a man today, which is sort of taking the best of our past and bringing it into the future. Getting us connected to our bodies, getting us authentically connected to others, and with that, one man and one group at a time, really beginning to change this planet.
That's a really, really good answer. And I love that it only took you 2 seconds to come up with that. And what an incredible mission, starting out there working with all of these guys. I know you probably go to bed at night and sleep like a baby, knowing that there are people out there living better, healthier, more fulfilled lives, and out there really doing better in business, better in their family, better as a parent because of the research and the work that you do. So we appreciate you taking time to jump on the show with us today and share all of your wisdom with our listeners. And for our listeners, if you are interested in getting connected with Owen, we will link both these sites in the show notes for you, but you can go to meld.community and you can also find him on owenmarcus.com. Check out all of the great great information. He's got some free resources on those websites as well. And Owen, on there, you can also, you can see the upcoming retreats and things. If people are interested in kind of jumping in with both feet and getting plugged in, there's a lot of great information on how to get started with that as well. So very cool. So for our listeners, thank you so much. This has been the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Katie Beth Hand, and my guest today was Owen Marcus. Again, to connect with him, you can visit meld.community. We'll link all of those things for you in the show notes. And Owen, thank you again so much.
Thank you, Katie.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.